beginning that right now. So she's back with us, and I'll just turn it over to her to say hello to all of you.
Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here at the Community Advisory Committee today. Excited to meet everybody, and hopefully we'll meet most of you or all of you in person at some point. Yeah, as Sophia mentioned, I worked on the Central Corridor, which is the green line between the downtowns of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Also worked on this project over 5 years ago, and also the Southwest project in the Gold Line. I really think these community processes are integral to these projects. I have learned so much just by talking with the folks in the community. I can think of many, many examples on the Gold Line, my most recent project, where we modified our design, where we made changes because of committees like this. So they really are important to the development of these projects. So I'm excited to hear the discussion today.
Thanks, Chris. And the other person I'd like to introduce you to, who will be presenting to you tonight, is Kelcie Young. She has been with our agency also for a number of years, helping us complete some very substantial and important environmental documents. And she is here on the Blue Line to help us through this process. And we are also going to be hiring some folks to help support her in that work. And so you have any questions about an environmental process, what's in a document, what some wonky technical thing is about, or anything, Kelcie is really a leading expert in this field and will be a great resource through this process. I also say I've worked with her a ton. She's really committed to making these documents accessible and being very responsive to the community. So we're really excited to have her on board as well. And you'll be seeing a lot of her in kind of the next couple years as we develop those documents. So Kelcie, you'll have the floor later. I don't know if you want to just say anything now.
Just happy to be here with you all.
So thank you. And in the over the next kind of little bit of this summer and into the fall, you'll start to see more of our project team, because these huge projects take a lot of people, and now we need to get kind of staff to do that. And we know there's a lot of community questions and needs, and we'll be we need the folks to help answer those for everybody and move at a pace that people would like us to move. So that's kind of that. Jason, I will turn it to you to kind of lead us into the kind of action steps of the committee.
Sure. Thank you, and welcome to Chris and Kelcie. Excited to hear from you and work with you. So I guess first things first, we need to approve the meeting summary from our previous meeting from June. So, if anybody wants to make a motion to approve, I guess the first question is everybody okay with the meeting summary? And if you have any changes that you'd like to see, then just let us know. Now's the time. Otherwise, we'll approve the meeting notes from our last meeting.
Good to go. This is Adam.
Okay. So I'll take that as a motion. And if there's anyone, do we I feel like every single time it's like, do we call the yeas and nays? Like, they're approved unless we hear from, if somebody has an issue, let us know. But otherwise, those meeting notes are approved. So thank you for putting those together. And so then I guess we are moving on to our anti-displacement update.
And see, Terrence is here. He is in a different country right now. So yeah. He'll be giving us an update, and then we'll have to leave skedaddle to do his other country things.
Yeah. Good to be with all of you. Yep, I am actually in the most eastern part of North America in Newfoundland, Canada, and St. John's, which is quite interesting. I'm sitting in like a fish outhouse kind of thing, because it's the place that has internet out here. And anyways, kind of interesting settings. My flight got delayed. I was supposed to be on my way back, but anyways, I'm here. Really good to be here. my big thing is coming to sort of chat with you about an update with the anti-displacement work that we've been doing. Of course, I think the last time I was here was maybe January, February. It's been quite a while. So there's a lot to kind of talk about. We've had a big first Saturday meeting. And so yeah, just here to sort of give you an update. So on that note, this is sort of a look into our picture from our June 4th event, which was a day-long workshop at Juxtaposition Arts in North Minneapolis. As you know, we sort of convened this anti-displacement working group to sort of be the facilitators through this conversation. The June 4th event was packed. It was, I believe it was like, went from 9 to 4. So it was quite a long day, packed with a lot of really good information. We reviewed data from previous iterations of light rail projects to see what we can sort of learn about anti-displacement. So what was the experience that the different communities have from a displacement perspective, from both housing and cultural displacement? And so we looked at that, as well as we had a panel of folks who experienced or were working on that project. So I'm coming and share their experience as well too. So a lot of data, a lot of experiential sort of conversation about what can we learn from these previous light rail projects regarding anti-displacement. We did some code defining displacement, because defining displacement can be quite difficult, which we didn't want to really spend a lot of time doing, but it was worth sort of understanding what we all meant when we're coming to table to do anti-displacement work. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation, at least about what some of the major ideas that came from that. And then we reviewed a lot of anti-displacement policies from around the country, as well as what was been used here, which I think in some ways I've sort of been saying that, this process, like on June 4th, we probably are starting where a lot of processes could have ended, which is like, what are the policies that we want to focus on? But we spent some time sort of looking at all those things. And the real hope within that is to sort of find where folks are interested already from today's perspective, even just from the data that we reviewed, about where we need to pour more nuance into, what sort of policies do we need to build support around, what policies can we model, that sort of thing. So we want to go to another level within this process to really understand the type, like what are the things that we can do and what type of impact would they have. So I think that's a pretty exciting aspect of what it is. So in that way, we sort of decided on what we're going to be focusing on. Now, I just want to say that, I think a big part of it is, right, we're coming to you today, and I think we're still going to be doing some engagement around this exact same content of information. And so when I say deciding what to focus on, we're still continuing to make those decisions what to focus on. So part of it is each of you, as well as the rest of the general public, need to be, greater involved into this conversation. So I'll be talking a little bit about what we're planning on in that front as we sort of head into the next series of day-long workshops, which won't come till September. So diving in, going to the next slide, some of the key takeaways that we took from that particular meeting. In one way, it was sort of presenting on this research on how each LRT line has a different effect on the timing of displacement. Now, there's a lot that, of course, I can say about that. And one thing I'll say is that meeting is recorded and is posted on Kira's YouTube page. So you can go back and watch the whole meeting. We're going to have upcoming open houses that will sort of give you another chance to sort of get into the data of watching a 6-hour YouTube video isn't your thing. Totally get that. But the purpose wasn't to say, did displacement exist? I think we all already come to sort of the understanding or the recognition that displacement happened as a result of the previous LRT works. The question is, how did that displacement sort of look in more detail? And so our research sort of looked into that. One of the big things is that the Blue Line extension will experience development and pressures of displacement earlier than the other lines. So one of the things that we found was, within the original Blue Line, sort of we starting those displacement pressures happened once the line was completed. Then with the Green Line, it was when they got the full funding grant agreement. With the Green Line extension, it was even earlier than that. And I think some folks would say they already feel the pressure from the Blue Line extension project. So that's just going to show that there's sort of this trend of the effects sort of starting earlier and earlier. I think we're still quite a ways away from sort of huge effects because, this project is still a number of years away, but it just means that we're the right time to do this work that we're doing. And looking at the effects, of course, on how that impacted housing, cultural and business displacement, which are our focuses right now. But our research really sort of detailed that out in a couple different ways, looking at evictions, looking at sort of when things were, when did new construction and all those sort of things happen? What were the change in rents along the lines? So some of the things that we looked at. We looked at past research that had already been done, so all of it wasn't necessarily individual scholarship. Some of it was interviewing folks throughout the line. I think we interviewed a couple dozen folks around that to sort of get a pretty full picture, as much as necessary for us to sort of move forward in our conversation, right? So we're not trying to do, of course, we could do a more robust research report, but it was really just sort of getting the generalities for us to sort of continue to focus on within the context of this project. The next thing that we looked at was sort of the green line investment. Okay. Oh, no worries. Sorry. The Green Line investment framework. So we looked into sort of the Green Line in more particularities, which was about sort of what was the investment framework along the line, like what worked and what were opportunities for us to further our efforts. So what could they have done better if they would have a chance to do that project over again, was some of what we talked about. So we had some folks, I think we had 6 panelists total that came and talked about that. That's a great watch on YouTube from our YouTube channel. So I think skip ahead exactly to that, because that won't be necessarily recreated in the same way in the future open houses, but there's a lot to learn from that work, and just how they sort of approach housing, how they approach businesses, a lot of on the ground work for both of those sort of subsectors. And so we dived into a lot of that as well. Going to the next slide, we looked at national, like I said, some national policies, programs, and investments overview. So just this broad list. If you go on My Blue Line EXT, you'll find the materials for all of that meeting, including all the different policies that we looked at. I think there's quite a number of them, so I think there's a lot to look at. But there's a graphic sort of illustrating what type of displacement they mitigate. So highly recommend y'all spend some time on My Blue Line EXT, sort of familiarizing yourself. That's another good place to sort of watch the YouTube video. Tram Huang did a great job presenting that information. That will be recreated at the upcoming open houses. So I recommend that y'all look at that. And then there was sort of the anti-displacement work group recommendations to mitigate displacement for government bodies to work on. So higher overview of focus areas. So we split folks into small groups to sort of like, what are these policies that we need to develop more nuance to understanding? Because within any of these policies, there's a bunch of different ways in which you could do that. And we can model those policies for effectiveness going forward in the future. And so that's a question for y'all. Like, what are these policies that we need to develop more nuance into, to model more into? Some of the things that, we heard, we've got a pretty broad representation on the anti-displacement working group. Some folks were talking about, well, if folks are inevitably displaced, how do we sort of care for them? Or what are the different ownership strategies that we can sort of employ along the line? What are the different sort of like tax modelings that can sort of be implemented in order to sort of prevent displacement? So there was a lot of policies that were sort of cast across that, and I think you can sort of look into that as well. We'll sort of have that posted as well for you too, if you check Kira's website. And ultimately, this is still the standing question, I think, for all of you, right? I think nobody started at this project from zero. You probably already have these policies in mind. And so what are these policies that you need this project to focus more on, right? Developing more nuance, right? There's many ways in which you can do rent control. There's many different ways you can sort of administer property taxes in an effort to prevent displacement. And so we can model that and understand at the C, are we getting to the impact that we're trying to get to? So that's a distinct question for y'all and community as we continue engagement along the same line over the next month or so. And so I think that's an open question for us today, even if y'all have some thoughts on it. Can't sure if you can hear folks in the back. Sorry about that. Jumping into the next slide. So one of the things that we did in co-defining displacement, and this is another open question that we still have for each of you, but we asked, like, what do you mean by displacement? Man, I hope you can't hear everything that's in the background. What does displacement ultimately mean? And so some of the things that came out of that were, right, changes that force people out and feel like they no longer belong. People are forced out of a location and cannot live or work there anymore. Housing price increases, businesses forced out of the neighborhood, deconstructing, demolishing communities for economic gain. Our home or part of your home isn't available to you anymore. A return of those who fled. So I think this is namely pointing out like sort of white flight back to previously undesirable neighbors. So like folks moving from the suburbs back in because, this area is more desirable, or from maybe, I'm basically self-explanatory. And so I think it's important to get sort of generally on the same page about this, because I think this helps give us direction in terms of what are the types of, what are the policies that we really need to be focusing on as well. And so, what do you really mean in your own terms, right? Not the textbook definition, but just when you're sort of speaking to your neighbors, friends, or even in your own thoughts, when we're trying to address displacement, what do you really mean? So we spent some time with that as a community. And again, what everybody said is on Kira's website as well, too. Jumping to the next slide. So yeah, project website has all these different things, right? The work group membership roster. If y'all missed some sort of the calls out about that as they've come recently. A workshop and meeting recordings and summaries, the meeting materials, new releases and interviews, meeting schedule. All those things are on My Blue Line EXT, so definitely want y'all to check it out to see those things for yourself. So what's next, right? I think there's been an increasing demand on this project to get this work out in community, which was somewhat unplanned for, but it's what we're sort of trying to be responsive to today. So we're gonna have some open houses in the week of August 15th. Those dates will be announced, I think, hopefully by the end of this week, as well as the locations. Those are more places to go over the same materials that we talked about on June 4th. So it's another opportunity for y'all to sort of, right, I mean, I'm saying something once, but I think sometimes it takes a couple times to really catch all the things that I'm asking you, or to think about that, or to talk to the folks that you need to know, right? Well, here's more opportunities to do that. We'll also be doing some targeted open house style meetings or focus groups, say with the business communities, some housing communities. A lot of our qualitative work is focusing on a homeless community, youth, all these different sort of things. We're partnering to make sure that we're connecting with large parts of the community. And a lot of those things, what we're hearing, are going to come back on our September meeting. And speaking of those, our big anti-displacement working dates are scheduled, or we have the dates September 24th, November 12th, and February 11th are the dates of our 3 next full Saturday meetings. The next one will be all about housing and cultural displacement. Then the third will be about business displacement, and the last one will be about finalizing those recommendations. We'll have a couple small meetings in between just to sort of clarify and get to that point. But the big point is that we're making an effort to sort of refine what we're doing, or replan what we're doing to get out into community, to make sure that they have the full opportunity to cast vision on this work as well too. So, our first meeting really was getting to a point of like, okay, where's the nuance that we really need to dive into, build policy support within governments and amongst community to model and really understand if we're getting to the effectiveness. And so really the question and the time for right now is like, where are those places that we really need to focus on to build more nuance and understanding and model and build support within government. And that's what our focuses really are on for the rest of our time together, right? So it's not necessarily about learning for learning's sake, but it's about building that support and momentum around these different ideas coming from community.
Uh-oh. The fish house.
Fish house. We lost him a little bit earlier. He might rebuffer and join, but I think Kathy can take it over.
Yeah, so Terrence was just stating, the internal governments, they're starting to meet now and reviewing some of the materials that we as a group discussed and really were informed about at that June 4th meeting. And furthering the efforts as we communicate what policies, investments, and programs do we have available in-house right now? Where do we see the gaps according to the information that was kind of pooled together? But also, those public open houses are an opportunity too to understand if there's other things that the community is thinking about that we haven't thought about yet. So that we can make sure that we're really making a very good effort to think whole-mindedly about these displacement effects that the project may have impacts on within the community, whether it be business or residential or cultural. And so, well, there you are.
Sorry, I think the internet for a second, so I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I was just explaining
Well,
the
good.
internal government piece. So, and you talked
Oh,
about
sure.
the scheduled meeting dates. And then we have the additional 2-hour meetings, if we need them, to work
That's right.
through how government, if you want to describe what those are about.
Yeah, so a big part of the philosophy, I just have my camera off just to make sure the internet's running smooth. I think a big part of the philosophy is, I think some of the criticism that can come of this work is like, well, community already knows what it wants to do, just ask the governments what they want and move forward. I think we tend to believe that like we can make those and folks from community can make those requests at any time. Like we're not holding back from community being able to do that. But I think, our experience working with governments is that, yes, we need to build time and space for governments to ask these questions, to really have real authentic conversations back with community. And so part of this structure, what we built in this superstructure of organization that we're building within this project is building in structure within governments to be able to have that conversation to feed back into the work group. And so each government has an internal working group that is processing this information internally, asking their own questions of the project, and we can deliver back, research and data back to them as well too, so that when they show up in the room at the anti-displacement working group, they can have a real authentic conversation about like, yes, this is what works for us. No, this doesn't work for us. This is what fits the sort of the legal framework in which we operate in, or our jurisdictional boundaries, or resource allocations, or a possible resource allocation, right? All these different questions that are hard. If you ask them right now, they can't give you, the full answer to. And so we're building the process cognizant of that, right, governments will need their space. And I think that's really gonna, our theory is that will deliver higher accountability and transparency between governments and community. And I think that's what they want to deliver as well too. And so the structure to deliver that are these internal working groups at each of these governments that feed back into the anti-displacement working groups, which feed back into the overall management of this project. And by project, I mean Blue Line Extension as a whole, as represented in our work in anti-displacement working group. I'm not sure if folks were asking questions. Sorry if I dropped out. So that's why I paused in case anybody had any questions. Did I freeze?
Thank you, C. Terrence.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully you can hear me.
I can, yep.
Okay, good. Well, we appreciate all the work that you're doing, and thanks for getting us up to speed on where things are at, and Kathy for jumping in there as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate y'all. Get in touch with me. All right, I'm in a remote part of the world right now, but I'll be quickly back. I'm assuming my flights don't get canceled again. So, let's chat, let's make it happen. So thank you for letting me be here, and happy to provide the update.
Thanks, C. Terrence. I don't know if any of y'all have any questions for me, or I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, C. Terrence.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Jason, I keep waiting for you to unmute yourself, but then you're on the phone, so it's two of you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So my screen is going to be muted the whole time. Otherwise, it'll sound like a cacophony of, yeah, you don't want that.
Well, if the committee is ready, we can turn it over to Kelcie to kind of lead us into and some environmental next steps, and then combo of Nick is also maybe having some technical issues, so it might be Dan that'll be presenting, but we'll get there once Kelcie gets through her slides.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm here to get you all oriented to where we are in terms of our environmental review next steps. We can go on to the next slide. As I understand, folks are really wanting to get plugged into the environmental review as we're moving forward into our next steps. So just to provide a refresher on where the project has been, the environmental review steps were completed for the project definition before. So that environmental review document and record of decision were completed in back in 2016. So as you all are familiar with the route reevaluation, our project definition is changing quite a bit. The project would be running through and serving communities that were not assessed in those previous rounds of environmental review. So we're currently in a phase where we're conducting a reevaluation. That's a federal process step that helps decide whether, when you have a completed environmental document, if supplemental environmental review through further rounds of environmental review is needed. There's also a parallel process on the state side, which we can touch on in future meetings. So that's where we are right now. We can go on to the next slide. So the purpose of this document is to decide what happens next. And we prepare it as a project team, and we work with our federal lead agency, the Federal Transit Administration, and really they're in charge of making that decision. The document does recommend that a supplemental environmental impact statement would be the next step. That's due to the modified route has impacts and benefits to new locations that weren't assessed through those final EIS and record of decision steps. So a supplemental EIS is needed when a proposed project change would result in significant environmental impacts that weren't evaluated and disclosed, and then mitigation developed. So that is the anticipated path once we hear back from our federal partners, that we would roll into working on that first environmental review step starting later this summer, potentially, once that's reviewed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. What was that?
Can I ask a question really quick on that?
Yes.
So as far as the overall project, really the only place where things are staying, maybe not exactly the same, but really similar to the way that they were before, is in Brooklyn Park. And so I'm wondering, so the 2 bullet points, that means like the entire rest of the line is going to be resubmitted or get a reevaluation for the environmental review? Or is it only in like Minneapolis because that wasn't in the line before?
That's a great question. We're anticipating that the supplemental EIS would cover the entire project, knowing that there are aspects of the existing environment that may have changed. There are some time frame type of requirements for some of the, specific environmental topics that come into play. We're anticipating that our environmental review would cover the entire project, understanding that there may be greater detail needed for the areas that are new, but it would be for the whole project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I have a quick question too. If you
Sure.
do you foresee any issues with crossing the Greenway there? Right as you leave Minneapolis going into Robbinsdale, is that going to create a big hiccup, do you figure, or that should clear pretty easily?
Well, maybe I can touch on kind of the purpose of this and of the environmental review, kind of more broadly. I certainly would anticipate that would be something that would be looked at as part of this next phase. I don't know if other folks had something specific to add on that.
I can add on that a little bit. We have been coordinating with the park board on the project to date. So, we've had discussions of how, knowing that we need to be sensitive in that area, and it will be part of this environmental review. But I guess we'll have to identify what the impacts are and figure out how to mitigate for it. But I don't really see, I guess, problems.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And maybe to build on that a little bit, what this next, well, I can talk a little bit about what the purpose of each next step is too, but we're definitely looking to hear from, community members, committee members, about, issues of concern, things that we should look at in greater detail. Of course, we have our own list of things that we're aware of, but we really look to the community to help inform the environmental review as well. So we welcome any input on things that we should look at further. So we can go on to the next slide. So just to orient where we are in our overall, project schedule, our yellow box here is this next phase that will last for another 1.5 to 2 years. We'll complete our environmental review steps, documenting the benefits and the impacts of the project. There will also be a municipal consent step where the project seeks the support of the cities along the alignment. And that's based on the design of the project. Then we'll roll into engineering, which will cover the station locations, the light rail itself and other characteristics, bridges and other details, pedestrian and bicycle facilities and access to stations, and also station area planning. So we anticipate that these items will be happening sometimes kind of in sequence, but some things kind of happening in parallel too. And then after that, amended record of decision step, which I'll touch on, then the project can move forward into construction. Next slide. So to focus a little bit on the environmental review next steps, our first step is the supplemental draft environmental impact statement. So that's our anticipated path. And we're expecting that would take us through early next year. And then there would also be that municipal consent step happening in the spring, kind of concurrent with beginning to prepare the supplemental final environmental impact statement that will take us through towards the end of 2023 when we're anticipating an amended record of decision. So that's the broad overview, knowing that this can be, kind of confusing from a process or procedural step. We'll, include the community as we go along to help folks understand, where are the opportunities for input and to be part of this process. Next slide. So specific environmental next steps, we'll once we get the go ahead, we'll begin preparing the draft environmental impact statement. The purpose of that is to compare multiple options where we have them and document the impacts of the project. Sometimes we're looking at that in a comparison type of context. We also look at the project's benefits, and then that document gets published. And in terms of the formal public input steps, there will be a hearing where people can come give their testimony. We'll also, welcome people to provide written comments or provide, other types of engagement, basically seeking input from a range of different options. And then if we go on to the next slide, then that rolls into the final environmental impact statement step, our supplemental. And that's where we identify one definition of the project to move forward, finalize those social, economic, and environmental impacts that go along with the project, and disclose those, and then identify mitigation commitments. And then the next step after that is to amend the record of decision, which formalizes those commitments, and those commitments kind of live along with the project, taking us into construction when, we'll then monitor to make sure that we're completing those commitments. So that's kind of a broad overview of our the steps ahead of us here. Just want to make sure that people are understanding that our environmental review process is more than just natural resources. For this project, the human or social type of impacts will be a big component of what we're looking at, making sure that we're integrating the the work of the Anti-Displacement Working Group, environmental justice, other impacts to the community will be a major part of what our environmental review document focuses on. And we just really look forward to and welcome input from the community to help identify those, issues of concern or sensitive areas, sensitive properties, things like that. Any questions now that I've kind of gotten through all of the overview slides? Right. Well, I think Nick will take it over and talk about our design next steps.
All right, with no questions, thanks, Kelcie. And so if we can forward on to the next slides. Right there, perfect. All right, oh, actually back one, please. So as we start to evolve through the project, folks are asking us, well, okay, how does the designs team come up with the design, and how do you guys make decisions and move forward? So as we've gone through our this initial phase of identifying what the route would be and making the recommendation for the route, we've taken feedback from the community, from our advisory committees, and from our project partners. And our project partners are, the cities along the corridor, and the county and MnDOT and everything. So what we have been doing to this point to come up with a route recommendation, we've been working with our project partners in what's called issues identification teams, IITs. And so it's just kind of helping us to develop and determine, what the route to advance would be by identifying, what some of the issues are along those, so we could, quantify what those are and determine, what is the better way to go. As we've now switched, or we're shifting into our new phase of the project, and everybody should remember, we are still engineering wise, technically wise, we were at really the infancy of our design, at maybe, at about a 5% design, as we look at these route alignments. So we need to start developing, as Kelcie's slide show, we need to start developing our engineering design plans to a point where they can inform that environmental work that's happening, so we can start identifying what different impacts, how the route will go through, what the impacts are going to be, how we mitigate for those impacts, and then and how we handle those moving forward, whether it's a design or whatever. So we'll be working with the issues resolution teams, and those again are composed of city staff and our Blue Line project team members. We meet on a regular basis with the cities, and some cities, we've been meeting quite regularly, some, maybe monthly along for this past 18 months or so. But as we start rolling up our sleeves and going into design, those meetings become more frequent, a lot more collaboration, a lot more things that we need to cover from. So as we're looking at these designs, we start to develop this list of engineering design issues as we're looking at the alignment, and we update that list regularly, and the goal is to try to identify what those issues are, figure out how to address those issues, or come up with the timeline and move forward with them. And as we move forward with this, we make sure that we bring these issues up, or at least the route we're going forward with our advisory committee. So as we have these meetings, what we like to do is have regular design updates, and we focus on maybe a portion of the project and how we're advancing it, and things that we're working with. So during our RT meetings, our issues are resolved and incorporated into the design, and then that helps again to inform that environmental process. Next slide, please. So I have some example slides of each city here along the alignment, and things that we're looking at and starting to pull together. And starting at the north end, Brooklyn Park, I think is, I think even the earlier question on, well, Brooklyn Park really has stayed the same, as anything changed. Well, we need to refresh that previous design. It's been sitting on the shelf. We were at 90% plans, but things change. Environmental requirements change. development happens along that corridor. So we need to make sure that those plans still meet the revised design and environmental requirements. You know, for instance, stormwater is a good example. Our whole stormwater rules of how we handle it and what the design storms that we're designing for have changed. So we need to take a look at that and update our plans accordingly for that. New developments along the alignment. You know, we've been working on this for quite some time. As development happens along the corridor, we need to work with those developers, make sure that that's incorporated or identified in our plans as we're moving forward. So we're working in cooperation with it. And then, for instance, in Brooklyn Park, as we start moving south, the 63rd Avenue station was right up next to the railroad. We were co-located in that position in between the freight rail rails and County Road 81 tucked in there. Now we're having to move it over about 100 feet. Well, that changes the condition and how that station operates and how we access the station. So that's a good example of things that we're doing in Brooklyn Park. Next slide, please. Crystal really is another good example. As we looked at this section of County Road 81 going through Crystal, we wanted to identify that, you know, what the capacity of the roadway out there is, you know, how do we handle that capacity of the needed capacity for traffic out there. We need to look at how the intersections operate out there on County Road 81 and how they would operate with the light rail going through there. So, you know, a good example, what we see here is the option where we have looked at County Road 81 and Bass Lake Road. You know, for the most part, there's capacity on that roadway, but that intersection had a high volume going to it. And with light rail in there and all the traffic movements, you know, that started to degrade the operations, and that's what our model showed. So we needed to identify how to mitigate for that. And so one of the options of what you see here is, and we've talked about this in the past, is an overpass. So the through lanes of County Road 81 go up and over Bass Lake Road. Bass Lake Road stays down at grade. There's ramps and off ramps to get on and off of 81 from Bass Lake Road. And then in this scenario, we have the station down at grade. So, you know, this solves quite a few issues for us. You know, it solves the capacity. It helps that intersection operate. You know, we project at a better condition than it does today, even with light rail going through there. And then helps identify, you know, some of the key issues that we look at for our stations, which is, you know, safety and access to those stations and how you get there. And by putting this station down at grade, it makes it a lot easier for pedestrians to access on the north end. You know, if you're going on Bass Lake Road and crossing, you know, what is the intersection? You're only really crossing maybe a lane or 2 lanes of traffic to get to the station, and that's at an on-ramp that's in a signalized stop condition. Or on the south end of the station, you can actually cross underneath 81 on both sides to access the station without even having to be exposed to highway traffic. So these are other keys. So we're refining that design, station, and access and how we get there. Next slide, please. Robbinsdale, another one is really, as we're looking at this station placement in the downtown. I mean, we still need to work on how we fit within 81, where those station goes within the downtown area, and how to get access and everything to that, and how to keep the intersections operating and operating at a good level and safety. North Memorial is a really good example, and that's what's shown on the slide here of this was the opportunity with this station alignment to get a station in at North Memorial that serves both that southern part of Robbinsdale and the northern part of Minneapolis in this location. So, you know, how do we get this station that it's an easy access, that it serves the campus, that it serves the community around it, that it serves that grand rounds, the parkway through there, and has good connections. Next slide, please. And then as we get down in Minneapolis, one of the things that's come out of our public meetings is looking at that section between downtown and Broadway and how we get there and reevaluate if there's other options other than the proposed Lindale option that we brought forward. So we're actively evaluating those options between Target Field Station and West Broadway Avenue. We're developing those options. We're preparing a matrix to weigh them out to determine, the pros and negatives to those options. And then what we'll do is bring those out there and during a robust community engagement session with that. But we work with the project partners in the city on this along the way to determine, what are those issues with each one of the options. So as we're looking at these, I've kind of gone through very quickly that, some aspects are just, key elements that we're working on in each city with that. Are there any questions?
I have one for you, Nick. On this slide, it shows that the train does split Broadway and one block north of Broadway. Is that for sure, or what? Is that just a reference?
That's just a reference to an option. You can also see, we have that triangle on the south end, whether it's, to go up 7th Street or if we were to go on East Lindale. So it's just showing those are some of, those potential options that we're carrying forward, and we'll work through those. These are key issues that we're looking at in this area.
So you're still making the decision currently from roughly James to Lindale, if it's split or singular? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Or is it
about Irving.
Really Irving. Yeah, about Irving, where you start to come into that curve.
Yep. Cool. Thank you.
So this is all to process. All the things that we didn't tackle in the first phase, that'll be the focus of our work, kind of the next step, right? And I hope this illustrates to folks just how many more decisions there are to be made on a lot of different things, and a lot of work to do. And the kind of the getting a route gave us kind of the scope of our work in a sense, and now we get to dive into that and really have some very in-depth conversations. So that leads into, for those of you that are interested in continuing with us, this is the kind of discussions that we will be having. Nick, I think, has to go, so there he goes. But this is kind of the plug for trying to get reappointed. Is so take the Lindale area, take whether we're on 21st, part of the LRT, all of the LRT version of that, take connectivity questions for the North Memorial Station, or pedestrian access at 63rd, right? Those are all things that the technical experts will get together and their issue resolution teams and kind of weigh options and put together information. And then that's what's brought to all of you to weigh in on, to give input on if they're thinking about the things that matter to community, or what would work best in your neighborhood as they seek options. And with Kelcie's work, where there are impacts, thinking of ways that we minimize, and then potentially mitigate them. So that is a whole process in itself. And to her point, it is both the physical environment, things like birds and trees and all that kind of stuff, but also the very kind of social aspects of it as well. So kind of a lot of work ahead of us. And it's that in some ways it'll feel like a pivot, right? That we're kind of in this new phase. In some ways it'll feel very much kind of the same, just a progression of the work that we've been doing. So at the beginning, I kind of went through kind of steps to anticipate, but just to reiterate, expect follow-up communications from us as your municipalities share how they're seeking their, sorry, I have to take a drink of water real quick. How would share their processes for reappointments. We will make sure that you all are informed, and we'll definitely send links to the Met Council / Hennepin County application. And I haven't said this enough times already. For those of you that we've really valued this group and your feedback, and we really hope that everybody that's interested applies to continue, because we would like to see all of you. And if you have any questions on that front, just please reach out to staff in addition to the communications that we'll be doing. So any other questions with that? We wanted to do something special for you all, but we couldn't really think of a good idea to do virtually. So it's just kind of thank you.
Hey, a broad question. The IIJA money didn't go through the matching funds from the state. Is that going to affect the project timeline at all?
No, probably not. No.
Probably not. Okay.
Oh, that was never generally a source likely for this project anyway. Now, if we can still potentially at some point tap any of those additional funds as the project goes on through years, it could help provide an additional source of funding, but it isn't really affecting the schedule as we know of it now.
Okay, cool. It won't like incentivize other projects ahead of us, and then it will stymie this, correct?
That's correct. It will not.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Other thoughts or questions, or just any, this is kind of the end of an era in a sense, since we are seeking reappointment. So if anybody has any just general thoughts of what they've liked the most, what they'd like to see different, this is also the time to let us know.
Well, this is Adam. I think the meetings are invaluable. I think they're awesome to be a part of it. I'd love to see the project come into fruition. I would like to be in person.
Yes, that is the plan. So when we seek applications, we'll be making it clear that we'll be meeting in person as part of that. Hybrid would be nice, but our agency has made the call that hybrid just makes it so meetings don't go very great in terms of committee participation and other reasons. But one of the things that this project team noticed is that meeting virtually doesn't give time for the committee members to get to know each other. So you might start to know, you start to recognize names and the staff's project faces, but you don't really know each other. And that I think has affected some of the ways that we dialogue. And so it's intangible, but we think it makes a difference. And so we hope to be in person as well for the next phase.
Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say thanks to everyone as co-chair. It's been a privilege to represent the group and get to speak to the CMC on our behalf and kind of give them updates on what we've been talking about. We've always tried to have good discussions. So thanks to everyone that's taken part in this process. And thanks to the team. I know, not all the feedback is easy, but I appreciate that, it was all taken and listened to, and, especially in the last couple months, just increasing the amount of communication, more mailers going out. So really appreciate that work.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, silence for a minute. This last call.
I just wanted to say thanks everyone too. This is my first time doing this, and super welcoming. And yeah, I think sometimes, we all know this, there's nothing we could do, but sometimes I think the communication was a little stilted because of the virtual aspect of it. So yeah, thanks everyone. It was super welcoming. It was great. And I'll try to do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Hopefully next round. round.
Yeah.
So we re-meet in September, is that, or if
probably?
So what is it? Yeah,
next,
give us
the
kickoff
the process. The kickoff would be in October. So we'll give the cities all the month of August basically to do their appointment process, but some of them actually go to council to get things approved. Some don't, some do. It's kind of a mixed bag between each city. So they'll get letters kind of after in the next week or so, end of July, asking. We will also be posting like the link for the Met Council Hennepin County at the end of July. You're allowed to, I guess, apply for both, but we appoint after we officially appoint after we hear from all of our municipalities, just because some people do kind of go both directions, and that's kind of our check. So letters out end of July, appointments through August, official communications in September, kind of being buttoned up with a kickoff in October. And again, usually we meet first week, but because it's Yom Kippur, it'd likely be that second week of October. We want to be respectful of people having major holidays that they need to attend to. So.
Or we could have a meeting and break the fast all together.
That'd be fun too. That'd be fun too.
Is it, Sophie, is it possible to keep it on Wednesdays if I reapply? Is that a thing? We can keep going?
Yeah, I think usually how we always handle it is that we assume that the set time and date is the time of the committee. We always kind of do a little ask check, but there really has to be a kind of an overwhelming majority of people that are like, I don't want to do this, because in the appointment letters and how we'll kind of frame the application is we give the time and the day of the week to folks, because that can matter quite a bit, right? Like I sit on some of my cities boards or whatever commissions, and I like if somebody changed the day of the week on me, I'd be like, it wouldn't work, right? So we try to be pretty explicit, but kind of go through that process as well. When you set your charter, it's technically an open question, but it's hard to move a date. So Wednesdays seem to work well.
Perfect. Thank you.
That might be it.
All right. Well, should we adjourn?
You guys are ready.
Call it a meeting. Okay. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. And hopefully we'll see a bunch of people back in the fall when we reconvene.
Looking forward to seeing you all again. You know where we are. In the meantime, if you have any questions, thoughts, or just want to hang out with us.
Yeah, and you'll be able to see when we're out there. So keep your ears on about all the various public engagement efforts that we put out there, and hope to see you all joining in those things.
Well, thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks for your commitment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Say, Sophia, can you and Chris hang on for just a minute after everybody logs off?
Sure.